Hello, Sid.
Hi, Joe. Thanks so much for agreeing to record a conversation with me. This is a celebration of your wonderful installation and your brilliant book. So here's to you.
Oh,
thanks
cheers.
for joining me. Cheers. It's of course a great shame that we can't be standing in your installation talking to people, but I am one of the few people that were lucky enough to see it in the flesh. So it's very nice to come together and actually mark it in an important way. I do feel, however, the film you've made is a really good sense of what the installation was. So for those people that haven't seen it, I would encourage you to watch the film. I'll give a very brief intro on us working together. I was lucky enough to have the first solo show of yours in my space in 2017 when the gallery was in King's Cross. And I feel like every time I've shown the work or we talk, it's evolved and developed in the most exciting way. In late 2018, we had another solo presentation, and that same year we showed at Photo London together. So nice to wait a few years to now do this. We've shown painting and sculptural elements, but importantly, and I suppose a launching point for our conversation, is that when we first met, I would have considered you a photographer. Contentious point.
That is a good place to talk about.
Yeah. So perhaps we can start talking about your practice and your journey and how you've kind of evolved from that point.
Yeah, great. Okay, thanks for that, Sid. I'm going to try and share my screen and show the slideshow if it works. I don't know. Let's first of all quit the thing that's pinging on my computer. Here we go. Right, let's share the screen. And okay, can you see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try again.
Is it not moving?
No, let's just try one more time. I'm gonna just see if I can launch it separately. Okay. Lovely. Sorry about this. Just bear with me. It's just wonderful Zoom etiquette. I should have learned how it all works by now, but
you are the queen of Zoom. If you can't do it, nobody can.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, let's present from the beginning, please. Okay, so this is the slide from our first show in your King's Cross Gallery space in 2017. This piece was called And Repeat to Fade, sort of like an ever evolving in my studio at the time piece about Caroline Gardens Chapel, which was one of my project spaces that I was running at the time. And this was you were the first person to sort of give me the opportunity to take all the sort of materials that I was gathering around this sort of ideas of layering and time and sort of what paint meant to us in these situations, and sort of put it into a gallery space. And this is sort of like the beginning of that sort of assemblage and collage that I've been sort of doing ever since, really. But as like you said, that I was taking a lot of photographs at the time. I still am taking loads of photographs, but very much photographs of paint. So there's always been this conversation with painting and photography. So yeah, so this was sort of like the first time I got to sort of explore that and start having conversations around that. And so like layering photographs on top of canvases and vice versa, and also sort of stacking up things on the ground, and sort of seeing how I could sort of play around with collage into 3D into the space as well. And
so much so I'm right in saying I think that those paintings are called invisible paintings because they sit on the printed image, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the starting point for this project was actually taking blank canvases into the space and painting them until they became invisible, because I was basically painting what was behind the canvas to make them blend in, if you like. and then sort of got more and more gestural, and decided to sort of mix the whole lot up together. I think this is probably one of my first real mixed media pieces. Up until this point, I was really separating out, that's my painting, that's my photography. And here around 2017, with you giving me the opportunity to do this show, sort of putting it all together. And sort of I've been sort of keeping along that theme, sort of mixing the two together. So this is a piece that we showed in Photo London for Discovery. And this was photographs of found materials, which is flakes of paint, but then collaged over the top with my own flakes of paint. So yeah, these pieces, more photographic, I suppose, but still sort of in keeping with the theme of sort of, and kind of where I'm going now. I'm not sure if you mentioned at the top, but I'm now on the MA painting at the Royal College of Art.
I didn't, but it's important. It's an important step. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that, to say that, people might have said I was a photographer. I never would have said I was a photographer, because my technical skills always felt really failing as a photographer, and also my heart was also always, well, it came from painting, predominantly painting. So now I'm quite happily to say mixed media, because it's a real mix, and it's a conversation between the two, between photography and painting, and actually that's sort of become more and more important. Yeah, and especially,
and that always suited you better, really. I mean, it's interesting we say this with this slide up, because this is one of the images we took to Photo London. So to take this into a photography fair that's dedicated to the medium of photography, when actually they are edition prints, but they're all unique, they're all hand finished. You've always, even when you've kind of been put in that box, as it were, you've always flipped it on its head in the most interesting way.
Yeah. Oh, that's what's nice about the course that I'm on. Even though it's painting MA, it's really broad. They don't expect you to only paint or even paint. So it's kind of, very much about my extended painting practice, which is a good place for me to be. Yeah. And also over the years, I've been running project spaces. So to go into an MA now is really important, to sort of take my mind away from the project spaces, away from curating and making other things happen with other artists, but and actually really focus in on my own practice. Yeah.
And I think that's particularly interesting in terms of what we have shown together. The found objects become hung like paintings. The sculptural objects sometimes have a photographic element. There's always been this kind of conversation of things. So to land up now in an installation kind of feels like it brings together everything really well.
Yeah. So I'm going to flick onto the next one, which is the book. It's a little video of Chris Bedson, who designed it, who's also my husband, who designed the book. He's flicking through for me.
Yeah, and while we're watching this, I'll fill in the blanks, really, to say that it was a total pleasure to work on this. There was a lot of editing to do, because it's the culmination of images taken over 5 years, so it's a huge amount of work. And for me, this sums up exactly what we're talking about. It's some of the spreads, it's unclear where the kind of constructed work, where the artwork, as it were, that you've made starts and stops. It mixes installation, found, made, all together in the most brilliant way. I was saying to someone the other day, it feels very Joe Dennis in that sense. It feels like a real explosion of the things that you're most interested in, and to launch it in, as we are doing, in connection with the installation feels like a really brilliant way of kind of elongating those ideas, I suppose.
Yeah, so the book, like you said, it's like over the past 5 years, it was lots of photographs taken by me, and I'm actually really rubbish at archiving. So on my computer, there's just like loads of images which have sort of yet to be sorted. And then lockdown came and I was in Amsterdam, so I was like, oh, okay, now's a good chance to start archiving everything and sorting it out. And I'd had in the back of my mind to make a book, so it was just, it was a perfect storm, really. to sort of start putting these images together.
Sure.
But also because of the way that I take photographs, I'm taking photographs of things that are interesting to me, things that inspire me, but then I'm always photographing inside my studio. So I'll paint something and I'll take a photograph of the paint or the mark making, or I'll be in a derelict building and take a picture of the paint on the wall. So yeah, it's a real mixture of things that I've seen that are interesting, but also things that I've made in response to those photographs. And I think also sort of it's about me developing my own visual language. And I know I said it to you before, but now it's complete. I can use it as a sketchbook. So I'll reference back to things. So at the moment I'm painting in my studio, and I've got the pages of the book all over the wall, because I'll be looking at things and thinking about that texture or that place or that color that I saw there. So yeah, so yeah, go on.
I was going to ask you exactly about this actually, because when it's in your hand, which I hope everybody listening to us will have a chance to have it in their hand, you've definitely made choices in terms of the printing of it that make you feel like it's a kind of journal of some kind, a kind of sketchbook, or at least a reference book. It feels to me always like it should have kind of sticky notes sticking out the side, and so I think you've captured that with the design choices really well.
I was thinking very much about it being something small and easily sort of bendable. You know, I knew that it wasn't going to be like a photo essay or a traditional photo book, and I wanted it to be something sort of softer and really accessible. I was just going to show you these other slides, because at the same time during the first lockdown when I was in Amsterdam, so I had a studio in London that I'd been traveling backwards and forwards to a lot, and then also luckily to have a studio in Amsterdam, and with very little materials. So whilst I was making the book, I was also making this series of work, which I know that you've also got on your website, called Shifting Sands, and this was about gathering together the detritus from my studio. So it's kind of really went hand in hand with making the book, of sort of gathering all these like little pieces and fragments together to make something whole, but also very much a sort of speaking to the time that we were in, stuck at home and sort of feeling fragmented and sort of a little bit lost. So at the same time as making the book, I was making this series of Shifting Sands.
It's interesting that it makes your what lockdown has, one of the many things it's made you kind of think about, I suppose, is really kind of going micro. Some of the work is so macro and outdoors and ambitious in terms of scale, and letting the kind of elements of, you know, you've had paintings on fabric hang down the side of buildings before. You know, it's interesting that being inside has made you kind of have this internal look in a different kind of way.
Yeah, just sort of like a focus and in, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know what's happened here, but I've got the book and all sorts of different stuff going on.
That's quite nice. And I suppose really important to add that all of that body of work, as well as the book, was just before you started your course, which is an MA in painting. So I suppose subconsciously or not, but you're bringing together what had come before and perhaps making space for a different path of some kind. I don't know if that's fair to say.
No, that's pretty much fair to say. I think the book was pretty much done. I think we'd planned to launch it just at the beginning of my MA. So it was sort of going to print as I was starting on the painting course. And it did feel like it was timely for me. It's like, okay, grab your photographs together, get your sketchbook, get your head in this space, and sort of, it was sort of like a little bit of a roundup, if you like, of the past 5 years. But like I said, and now I've got this thing which is as much for me as any audience. So I was making it very much for myself to sort of say, okay, what have we got here? What is, you know, what is this stuff? What is this language you're talking about? And how can I take that forward into sort of painting or more installation and more sort of assemblage works? Yeah. So this is like just another spread from the book, from George's car yard. So looking at the textures on the street. Yeah.
And it's interesting what you say about contextualizing it, because we did, I think we're going to touch on this a bit later, but we did invite David Campany to write an essay. And that was just for the book and on the book, but actually what it evolved to be is such a wonderful roundup of all your thoughts and your kind of inner workings and what the discipline's really about. So, but before we get to that, I just wanted to ask about the title of the book. I think it's just before we go too far away from the initial conversation about the kind of mediums mixing. It's always had a really interesting relationship to the photographic, but also your personal relationship with found objects. And do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite simple, really, because I mean, the sort of the way I speak and the way I think is, you know, it's quite simple. No, I sort of had it in my head that, you know, I've touched this with my hand, meaning I've made it, or I've painted it, or I've picked it up from the street, or jumped in a skip and dragged it out. As you know, we've done that together. And then
yeah,
so like
one of the first things we ever really did together, jump in a skip.
So like, yeah, I've touched this. It is definitely about that sort of making and feeling connected with materials. So I've touched this with my hand, and I've touched that with my eye. For me, is about photography, and about being inspired by what you see, and also capturing what you see with photography, or documenting even. And it just kind of stuck. It was kind of just what was sort of going through my head about the different aspects of things that I'd seen and made in response to it.
And ultimately about editing and selection, which is what you do so well, and actually what I think the book really does, and certainly the installation. I mean, you know, the found objects are very considered, of course. I mean, there are piles of fabrics and piles of found things and bowls of what might be detritus in a different context, but actually everything is, you've touched it with your eye, in the sense that you have made it into something I think that's, for me, what the title really alludes to, as this process of editing or selecting.
I'm going to flick to the next slide. Oh yeah, I wasn't sure what's coming next, so this is another one from the book. So yeah, so like we said in the book, sometimes there's photographs of things that I've made in response. So this is one of my paintings on glass, and a close-up of the paint. I put this in the slideshow because it's an older piece of work that I showed with you, which was taken in the Ladywell series, because I thought it really spoke to how the sort of how things that I've already done in the past or taken photographs of in the past will speak to what I'm painting or making now. So for this one was the burnt out room with the tiles has sort of always stuck with me, and sort of working with tiles on the new installation. There's quite a lot of tiles on the walls inside autonomous zones, sort of, which speaks to this sort of older work, like of sort of these found places and sort of the compositions that you can find in these sort of derelict spaces. I think next is the video. I'll just see if I can flick. Okay, so should we just play this and then talk?
Yeah. So this is the video of the current installation.
Yeah. And you can see the tiles. Actually, it starts off the tiled bit in the background that I made. So let's go see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure lots of people have been able to see this online already. So I'm going to just chat anyway.
I hope so. It's great. I wanted to be quiet just long enough so people could get a sense of the sound, because actually there is this sound that's recorded in situ. So because it is a railway arch, there's a train going overhead from time to time. And for me, that's one of the things that, not that it's a shame to see it instead of being there, but actually it is so much about smells and feelings, and of course it's quite a cold space, and there's it's so rich in terms of the kind of sensory side. installation.
Yeah, well, I thought it was important to sort of layer the sound onto it, so you get a sense of that. You know, also kind of a sense of stillness of it, even though it's on the Old Kent Road, but it's in this railway arch, and you kind of feel sort of in this little secluded space, which is a bit dark, and sort of there's a sense of discovery about it, which is what I tried to sort of capture with the film, you know, the documenting of it, this sort of sense of discovery of this sort of secret place that's literally just behind the Old Kent Road.
Yeah. And of course, that leads us on nicely to talk about the title, Autonomous Zone, which is actually a quote from David Campany's essay that he wrote for the book. He's done a really wonderful job. So those of you who haven't had a chance to read it, I would strongly suggest that you do. I think he was a particularly inspired choice too to write about the work, because his style for writing the text was quite akin to your practice in many ways. He didn't want to I mean, you knew him and he knows of your work, of course, but he didn't want to interview you. He wanted a very kind of honest response to the work. So the fact that his quote has now evolved into the exhibition title is a really nice thing. An autonomous zone is exactly what you've created there. But perhaps you can elaborate and tell us why it sort of resonated with you so much.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to try and flick first. See, you know, the technology is always letting us down, but let's see if it works. No, that's just started it again. Ooh. Oh, there we go. So yeah, so after I read the essay, there was one particular bit in it about these. Well, he was talking about temporary autonomous zones, but it's sort of specifically to do with these sort of spaces that are on the margins of society, where they can become lawless or allow other things to happen. And it's very much the spaces that I've inhabited. That's what he was talking about. So the project spaces that I've run that I mentioned, so in 2 derelict houses and a derelict church, these are the places that I've been attracted to, and they are like autonomous zones, because, and what David said in his essay is that people like artists and teenagers are drawn to them. And I was, you know, I've got a 17-year-old boy who is constantly looking for places to be outside of the social norms, to hide from the adults, or, you know, to, you know, go off and just be alone. And these are the spaces that I've always sought out. So when I was thinking about making something in response, and well, for the launch of the book, I was sort of responding to that idea of those spaces that are sort of secret, and to create a space that's sort of timeless in a way. So it's, and kind of not explaining to you what it is, but allowing for possibilities, or allowing space for you to sort of project yourself into that space and decide for yourself, you know, where you should sit within it. I've been sort of reading a lot and writing a lot about ruins and how they do exactly that. They leave sort of gaps for your imagination, for you to sort of fill up the space. And I kind of wanted to explore those ideas with the autonomous zone. So sort of zoned it into four different spaces, and used lighting as a way to sort of lead into the next space. So the first one's sort of a little bit orange, and then you've got the UV light into sort of a reddish bit at the back, and then the outside space, which I covered in a canvas tarpaulin to make it sort of a little bit darker, which I think also dampened the sound from the road a bit as well. But yeah, so it was nice to have that as a sort of a springboard when you know, he's written that piece, and I've gone, oh yeah, that's interesting, that this is where I need to take the next thing. But I also wanted to sort of create something that spoke to the pages of the book.
Yeah,
because there's so much information in that book, there's so many images. I kind of wanted to sort of make an installation that sort of gathered together all of this sort of found objects and ephemera that I've collected over the years, the surfaces that I've made over the years, and sort of layer it all up and kind of have everything and more.
Sure. And more. Yeah, exactly. Well, what's been particularly interesting for me in terms of working with you on this is that, as you can see here, actually, there's some of the window paintings. And that's something I want to ask you about anyway, about the how they're made. But I think one of the things that you do so well here is, last time I showed the window paintings, they were hung formally with a lot of space around them in a white gallery space. But here they've kind of gone back into the world with which they came from, and everything's been, the singular parts become part of a larger installation. And as you're saying, kind of layered upon and upon and upon. And for me, as I say, the glass paintings are a particularly interesting example of this.
Yeah, so in this picture, it's difficult to tell because there's so much information, but at the top, right in the middle of the picture, is a painting on glass, which is on a found window. So one of the windows that I found on the streets, and then sort of in between this sort of fabric on the left-hand side is another one that's just leant up against the wall. So like I use sort of like a lot of stacking things in the installation. So this is the outside space where things are all stacked up against a photograph of an older piece of work. And the windows are also stacked up behind there as well.
Well, you really need to be told that's a photograph that it's still leaning against. You'd be told for thinking it was the real thing.
Yeah, that's a photograph of George's car yard, which is actually just round the corner from us. Another project that I did, but sadly now had been demolished, that car yard. But yeah, so I'm just flicking through the slides of the installation of all the different bits to get to here to talk to you about these.
Exactly.
Yeah, so these are two pieces that were in the installation. They were also shown at your gallery, part of the solid liquid series. So I started painting on these windows. It was kind of a revelation at the time that because I was interested in the found objects, interested in photography, interested in painting, I'd found a canvas, a ready-made, ready to go. This is going to be my new canvas. So I'd started this series called Solid Liquid, and I'm still and very much interested and sort of engaged with working on glass at the moment. So with these ones, I'd started by doing an image transfer of a black and white photograph onto the glass, and then back painting. So what you're looking at is the surface of the glass, and then behind it is the paint. So you're looking through the window to the painting, if you like.
So even however layered the painting is, your first brush marks are the ones you see.
Exactly. It's
sort
really
of blind painting.
It is blind painting, and it's really tricksy. And if it goes wrong, it just goes wrong. You have to start again with a scraper. But yeah, so these ones were older pieces, and this is a much newer piece painted last year. Actually, this was a piece of found glass on the streets of Amsterdam. So sort of moved on from only found windows, but also if there was any glass on the street, I would just pick that up as well, and sort of work in the same way. This is also back painted. I think it's quite funny in this one because somehow you can see the Dutch light in this one.
That's so nice. Yeah.
I feel like the palette changed when I was in Amsterdam for a while there. It's not quite as grimy as the London palette. Yeah, and this is another piece I did in Amsterdam as well, sort of introducing these sort of more structural shapes and objects into them. But yeah, so it's interesting because now I've actually flipped it and started painting on the glass as a canvas, but to be viewed from this side, if you like. So no longer always looking through the glass. So I think allowing myself to get rid of some of my rules and sort of free everything up a little bit.
Sure. But still treating the painting as an object and as a sculptural element, which is
yeah,
ultimately very much within your rules, actually.
Yeah, but they do become sort of like, yeah, sculptural objects. I think that's the last slide. I think we go back. Yeah.
Well, there was one thing I feel like we've skipped over slightly, looking at your lovely film, which perhaps we could go back to. It's not the first time you've shown work or displayed or created a zone, I should say, using UV light.
Oh no.
So the exhibition we had in 2018 had some window paintings in it and a kind of sculptural painting installation, I think it's fair to say. It was a sort of waterfall of painting. And we had an event that threw the whole exhibition under UV light and gave people that had seen the exhibition many times a completely different look on the show. It was great fun. That was when we could do things in real life.
Gosh, yeah.
But it's nice to see how UV, or rather how paint changes and what happens to the materials you're using, has stayed in your practice.
Yeah, there's something about the using in this installation I used sort of different lights and was sort of played around with gels and lighting gels to sort of make these zones, but really the UV lighting does something very, very specific, which is about the textures that I use, because it throws the texture back, or the colors back, certain colors back and certain colors forward, so it exaggerates things that aren't there in normal daylight. And yeah, it's sort of like an exaggeration of everything. And because I use these sort of the fluorescent paints so in my practice, I can paint something and then put it under UV light and it does something completely different. And that sort of, like, you know, it embraces the sort of accidental nature of my painting practice. But it also, it's funny, I mean, only, I guess maybe under 10 people got to see the installation. And what happens when somebody walks into a room which is sort of low light under UV like this is, there's a kind of stillness that comes over you. And it evokes sort of like an emotional response. And that's what I get when I go to the derelict buildings, and that's kind of what I'm trying to sort of dig down into. So I think it won't be the last time.
Yeah, I think it's also loaded with all the same connotations, really. I mean, not to suggest it's kind of lawless, but it's definitely a kind of nighttime thing. It's not, things could be lurking, things aren't in full sight. And I think that's one of the things that kind of exaggerates some of the things you're exploring so well.
Yeah.
It feels like a hiding place. You used recently in a text that you've written about the outdoor space, you used the word den, which it kind of, for me, is a really nice suggestion that, you know, there's an element of danger, but also an element of play, which I feel is really in keeping.
Yeah, and there's that idea of a sort of, not necessarily homemaking, but shelter making, den making. So making a place to be that feels kind of special, yours, or belongs to me, or belongs to you, you know. So there is that sort of, I guess, not childhood, but definitely teenage sort of longing, longing to be sort of maybe like 15 and make, you know, finding little spaces to be. Yeah. When I was 15, we found like a bomb shelter that we used to go to, and I think that those sort of experiences at that time of my life definitely are feeding into my practice now, and that's what I'm sort of going for.
Yeah, that's so nice. And I suppose importantly, it's as you're saying, it's homemaking in the sense that it's your living, breathing environment. It's not necessarily fixed. I mean, of course, for this exhibition and this installation, there was a moment that you kind of called it done. But it's still got the feeling that things can change and evolve. And again, like your practice thing, you'll find the next thing or bring the next idea in.
Exactly. And not only is it evolving in the space, but also things that are put together like this are not static. So it might be that I take this ladder out of here and something out of the pile of materials, and that becomes something else and has a life somewhere else and becomes a part of a different sort of collection or assemblage of things. So and I think that's probably a good point to say that's where I'm going. You know, that's sort of like taking little pieces out of here and sort of making new assemblages out of it is sort of what I'm exploring now.
It certainly makes it fun working with you, because suddenly there's a moment where we realize that things need to be framed, or, you know, certain production needs to be made, and you realize that from this world you need to kind of take bits out of it or formalize them in a sense.
Kind of make your life difficult.
well, no, it definitely keeps it fresh and interesting, and throws up a huge amount of possibilities all the time, which what could be better? I mean, that's so exciting. But yeah, I mean, it certainly unlocks a conversation about the studio or the installation environment versus a kind of a formal gallery space.
Yeah.
Which I think hopefully from the short conversation we've had and the range of images you've shown, hopefully gives people a sense of kind of how pieces can live in this world, but also live independently.
Yeah.
On that website, the gallery website at the moment, there's a PDF of the individual work. So it perhaps be interesting for those listening to have these images in their mind, but then also go back to how some of the images exist on their own.
Yeah, I was just flicking back because you also have these. Oh, go away. No, the book just wants to play.
The book wants to play. Wants us to talk about that. You were going to say the shifting sands. I do. Exactly.
The shifting sands are also up there, which is sort of actually a really new piece of work as well. So I'm just going to get rid of that. But yeah, so it's.
And I'm glad you did get to
all together there. You know.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say you did get the chance to show them with Scene 15, didn't you? There was a really nice group show that Vivian had put together.
Yeah. As soon as I got back from Amsterdam, in between lockdowns,
I know.
had a group show quickly at Scene 15 in Peckham, which was really nice to be able to show the work quickly and then get locked down again.
Yeah. Well, you were lucky. You chose the perfect window.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to chat, Jo, and have a drink together and celebrate your wonderful installation. So thank you.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's really good.
It's been great fun. I feel like what we always talk about is so rich. We could go on forever, but short and sweet. And hopefully people will have a look at what's online, look at the video, read the essay, and then probably come knocking on your door with loads of questions.
Don't bother, just go and buy the book. Go to the website and buy the book. There's not very many copies left, actually.
I know, I was going to say, I mean, perhaps we're too late. There's not very many copies. Well, people have got to be quick.
Yeah, I think I've got 10 special editions still, or maybe 8, and 20 ordinary ones, normal ones.
That's amazing. Well, people are going to have to be quick.
Yeah.
Quick. Get them quick.
Thanks so a lot, Sid.
Really nice to chat to you, as always. Thank you. And congratulations.
Oh, yeah, cheers.
To you. Cheers.
Cheers to you.